a different, unique villain. We knew this film would be coming off of Thanos, be coming off of Killmonger. How do we find a villain that is very different, very unique? And when people see the movie, I think they'll see that we found it in Ghost. That is what we want from Joe and Anthony Russo. Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck are not with us tonight because they're on location in the last couple weeks of Captain Marvel. James Gunn, who's working on Guardians 3 right now. We want all of those unique voices. Ryan Coogler, who might be around here somewhere. That's how it works, is finding these filmmakers with great visions who can elevate sort of the fun ideas and some of the stories that we have.
Hey everybody, it's Charlie. We got a whole bunch of Avengers Phase 4 stuff to talk about. Like you saw, Kevin Feige doing a bunch of press for Ant-Man and the Wasp. Naturally, everybody's using it as an opportunity to try and get information about what's happening after Avengers 4. So he did give us a pretty good timeline on when they're thinking about developing certain big properties, because people have been talking about Thunderbolts, Young Avengers, even Power Pack, A-Force, including Eternals, which is actually up a little bit sooner than you would expect. So if you're finding me for the first time, be sure to subscribe to get all the Marvel videos. There's a new round of that Infinity War Blu-ray giveaway too. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment on the video. So starting with the big stuff first, Young Avengers, like the newest thing on the list of Phase 4 movies that we've heard about, like Black Widow and Eternals. He said right now, in the movies that we're getting in the next couple of years, they're planting the seeds for Young Avengers, particularly characters like Cassie Lang, who becomes Stature in the comic. So I'll read his quote here. He says, "We've always been big fans of Power Pack and figuring that out, so where and when would we see the evolution of that? I don't know, and certainly taking our cue from the comics, as we always do, that's why we wanted Cassie, a very young Cassie in this movie, to be inspired by her father, just planting seeds." So part of the idea that you've seen from the Ant-Man and the Wasp trailers is that Cassie Lang, little tiny Cassie Lang, says, "I wish I could be a hero like you, Dad," but she's a little girl, so of course she's not going to be a superhero for a long time.
I wish I could fight bad guys like you.
I mess it up every time.
But you all remember that we got a casting notice for what seems like an older version of Cassie Lang, because there's supposed to be some minimal time jump between Avengers 3 and the beginning of Avengers 4. So when he says they're planting seeds for things like Power Pack and Young Avengers, that's what he's talking about. Showing you a vision of something before they sort of fix the universe and the timeline resets to what it should have been before Avengers Infinity War. Then several years down the road, once we get through another Avengers cycle or two, we incorporate the X-Men characters, they have enough really young characters to actually do a Young Avengers movie. So there are a couple properties that you could do alongside traditional Avengers films. So like you have main Avengers films like Infinity War, Avengers 4, Young Avengers, Power Pack, Avengers Academy would be considered something a little bit different from that. Like if you had old man Tony Stark come back for a Young Avengers film so that they could do like a Breakfast Club situation. Well, they battle Kang the Conqueror through time and space. You could do that in a smaller way from what you would consider a traditional Avengers film, like a big $200 million film. You would have to spend that much money on it. But right now, the only characters that they've teased that would be a part of that Young Avengers team, I wouldn't think Spider-Man, because by the time we get to that, like say we get through 2 more Avengers rounds, by the time we get to Avengers 6, which we'll probably definitely see some X-Men take part in, Tom Holland in real life will be the same age as Chris Hemsworth was during the first Avengers film.
No hard feelings, Point Break. You got a mean swing.
Kid, you're an Avenger now.
So think about how old Thor looks in the first Avengers film. Like he's a pretty well-developed character by the time we got to that. Tom Holland will be a pretty old version of Spider-Man. So for all of you that wanted an older, more mature, hardcore version of Spider-Man in the MCU, Tom Holland is slowly aging into that, and based on the way that they're going with the Spider-Man films, we'll get through that third Spider-Man film where he graduates from high school before we get to any kind of Young Avengers film or anything like that. And if he was dubbed an Avenger during Infinity War, so I think regardless of his current biological age, you could consider him an A-list Avenger, not just because he's a super popular comic book character, but just remember, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen before they can do a Young Avengers film. You have to introduce those other characters. Like Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan would be another good example of a candidate for a movie like that. Just a much younger version of what you would consider a traditional Avengers level character. So I haven't talked too much about Power Pack because that's sort of an oddball property. If they do Fantastic Four and they work their way up to Franklin and Valeria Richards, don't know if they would ever do those characters, but if they want to do that, their children would also be good candidates for a Young Avengers Power Pack film. But the problem with characters like Franklin Richards is he's almost too OP for a film like that. Like Thor and Captain Marvel are two of the most powerful non-celestial beings in the MCU right now. Franklin Richards is almost more powerful than that. So it'd be kind of weird to have to balance his character with the other Young Avengers characters without detuning his powers or making them more powerful. But they've also talked about a Thunderbolts movie. The actress that plays Ghost, Hannah John Kamen, said that she totally wants to come back for a Thunderbolts film. They still have Baron Zemo, they have Frank Grillo's Crossbones, they have plenty of mid-level to A-list villains that they could put in a Thunderbolts movie. Like Michael Keaton's Vulture character would be a good Thunderbolts character. But you have to remember that a lot of Spider-Man characters and a lot of X-Men characters will be entering the universe shortly, so the list just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. The more awesome villains they have that aren't dead at the end of some of these movies, the more people you could put in a Thunderbolts team-up. But I'm kind of hoping we see a Norman Osborn or like a really big A-list villain that they could have to lead that team. Norman Osborn is just a character that they've used so much in the Spider-Man films before we got to Tom Holland that I think that they're chilling on him a little bit before they reintroduce him. But a lot of these plans that Kevin Feige has been talking about are just in service of the very, very different looking Marvel Cinematic Universe that he's been teasing. So Eternals is sort of like a whole separate thing because that's actually more real than this Young Avengers movie that he's talking about. Like Young Avengers is just an idea that he has right now. Eternals is something that they're moving forward on full steam ahead. Like there's a rumored Eternals character that we're going to see during Avengers 4. Right now, the rumor is that it's Kronos. If you're not a big comic book reader, that's Thanos' grandfather. They are ancient. So the way he talks about the Eternals, he actually gave a quote, so I'll read it in a second, talks about it like they're planning on doing the film set in the past. Here's his quote here. He says, "The Eternals, it's kind of an ancient aliens kind of sci-fi trope that we think would be fun to explore someday." So that's the idea that ancient aliens were responsible for the evolution of the human race. So he then goes on to say, one of the cool things about that property and what Jack Kirby did with it and what's been done with it in recent years is that they've been around for a long time, talking about the Eternals characters. There's this notion of all these myths and legends that we know from ancient times that were inspired by the Eternals characters. So think about the ideas of them introducing really powerful myths into the history of the Earth, then showing you those characters set during the far past. But because the MCU changes a lot of things about comic book characters, like Ego the Living Planet was changed dramatically from his comic book self, just expect whatever they do with that character to be a little bit different. But just let me know in the comments, they do a Young Avengers film in say like 4 or 5 years, who do you want them to include in that? Assuming that they introduce a bunch more characters to put in that within the next couple of films. What'll happen next is I'll post my non-spoilery Ant-Man and the Wasp review that should be up Wednesday morning. While you wait for that, click here for more new Avengers 4 and click here for more cool Infinity War behind the scenes. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.